Hello again. Today I'm going to be doing something that I've been meaning to do for a very long time, and that is a video tutorial on how to do this join, which you can see here. This, I am immensely proud to say, is my side-to-side slip stitch join, and there is a story behind it which I will try to cover very briefly. Back in 2017, I was pretty new to crochet, although I was doing a lot of blankets. They had become my obsession, and I was learning as I was making these blankets, probably one every month, if not more often. And each one was teaching me something different. By about the middle of 2017, round about May or so, I think I was working on a blanket which is called the Spots and Stripes blanket, and it's still for sale as a pattern in my Etsy and Ravelry shops. It's a blanket that I really liked making, and it involved using solid granny squares, a circle and a square rather than the square ones here, but it was solid. And I don't think I had even at that point learned how to do the continuous join as you go, which I'm sure you know is what is almost my default for joining granny squares. I found a joining stitch that was working the way I particularly wanted it, and especially for this quite, what would you say, geometric blanket, the Spots and Stripes blanket. So one day I got my yarn, attached it to one corner of a square. I had all the squares for the Spots and Stripes made up. So I just attached my yarn to one corner, brought another square up to meet it, and just had a go, just tried something. So I attached it in one corner and then went over to the corner of the other square and did a slip stitch. And then I came back to the first one, next stitch along, put in a slip stitch, and then over again a slip stitch, and I went like that from side to side with a slip stitch each time. And I can remember the surprise. It was one of these light bulb moments when I looked at what I'd done and I thought, okay, that must be a regular joining stitch that I've not seen. Or is it something that I've made up and it's just going to fall apart? I couldn't quite believe what I had done. But no, it didn't fall apart, because it made this lovely braided looking joining stitch, and it was as firm as you could get. It was raised, but it was raised in a regular way. It wasn't going to flop over, and it was really nice and flat on the back. So I thought, right, I haven't designed this. I can't have designed this. I'm pretty new to crochet. So I looked up my I'm looking across at it now, my extensive collection of crochet books, and there was nothing in there. I had a pile of crochet magazines going back to the 60s and 70s, which had belonged to my mother, and I looked through them, nothing. I looked on Google and Pinterest and YouTube and whatever, Instagram, Facebook, nothing. So I thought, I think I've come up with a stitch. And as I say, I was incredibly pleased with myself. So what I did was I shared it onto my blog. I think I had just started a blog. And I certainly shared it on Instagram. And within a couple of months or weeks even of me doing that, some of the big guns of crochet, I won't mention any names, but people who are, the ones that you see all the time on YouTube with their crochet tutorials, had picked it up. And I think the very first person to do that was a Russian lady. I think, because I've done quite a lot of research, and I think this Russian lady had got her, had obviously seen my little tutorial and transferred it to her YouTube video and made a tutorial, except that she didn't call it the side-to-side slip stitch join. She called it, which I had called it that. Did I say that already? I called it it's a bit of a mouthful, the side-to-side slip stitch join. In fact, it's a bit of a tongue twister. She called it the zigzag crochet join, which, to be fair, is a much easier name to remember. 2 or 3 months after that, it just started to go crazy. And every time it seemed that I was looking on YouTube, there was somebody else doing a crochet tutorial for this stitch. Some of them were a bit cheeky and pretended that they had invented it. You know, I'm not bothered. You can't copyright a crochet stitch, I know that. But some of them were pretending that they had made it up. And others were just simply showing people how to do the stitch, which is absolutely fine. And then I found one American lady. I'm not going to mention any names either, because I can't remember her. It's not somebody I see a lot on YouTube, but she obviously had a big following and did crochet tutorials, and she was doing it. But she mentioned me. She actually credited me as the designer of the stitch, and I was just about in tears of joy that somebody had actually recognised that I had done this. This is so childish. I know it's childish, but I am so pleased. It's like my baby. It's something that, although I was pretty new to crochet, I had come up with something different. So anyway, today, and I've rabbited on far too long. Today I'm going to show you how to do this, and this is the little sample piece that I've used for the tutorial. I'm going to show you this first of all, because this I dug out of my samples drawer, and I think this was a piece, just a sample piece that I did around about the same time. I'm guessing it's about 7 or 8 years old, and this is one of the very first times I used this stitch. But in this case, I didn't do the single colour like here. I outlined I joined each square with the colour that was belonging to the square, so you can see that it's quite a good patchwork, but you still get this nice little raised effect, but you don't have the bands of contrasting colour of the join. So that works really well, and I really must try that again sometime. It's particularly good with the solid granny squares. So that was my little sample, which I'd forgotten I had. And all my blankets, including the Spots and Stripes blanket, which was the first one to use this joining stitch, are no longer in my possession. I had a big blanket sale for charity, was it 2 years ago now? And maybe kind of foolishly sold off almost all the blankets I had made. The only finished blanket that I have left where I've used this stitch is this one. This was my Christmas one from a few years ago, called the Noel 9-patch blanket. And it was called 9-patch because it was made in blocks of 9 granny squares, which were then joined with a strip between them. And in the middle of the strip is this side-to-side slip stitch join. There's bands of a paler green in treble crochet, and then the slip stitch join. Now it's a little bit flat here because this has been through the wash many times, and it's now very, very soft, but you do still see a little bit of the, that's not it, that's it there. You can see the zigzag or the side-to-side slip stitch. So it's very useful and very adaptable, and I've been meaning for so long to do a proper tutorial for it. So this is a standalone tutorial. I'm not going to wrap it on any longer. Let's start with the tutorial. And I'm working with, this is Yarnsmith's Create, and it's the cream colour. It's pretty much the same colour as the centre of the squares. I think this was Stylecraft Special, but this is Yarnsmith's. create. So it's a DK weight, so my hook is a 4mm. I've also got my little tub of stitch markers, which I don't think I will use for this, but if you were doing a big blanket and you wanted to make sure that your squares were all put together and not going to move, you can use your stitch marker in the corners just to hold them in place. But for this sample, I don't need it. Now I'm going to start by working along the long join. There's no right or wrong as to where to start, but that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm just going to pick up my blue square and attach the yarn in the corner. You can do it whichever way you are normally used to doing it. This is just the way I have it. So I've got my yarn attached. Now let's see if I can get this still in camera. I'll pick this up and maybe just move these slightly off camera to let us see what we're doing. So we've got the pink one on the top and the blue one below. So I've joined in this corner, and all I need to do is go over to the corner, the corner of the pink, which corresponds, and I'm going to do a slip stitch. So I'm going to put my hook through the space of the corner, pick up the yarn and pull it through. Simple. And then I'm going to look for the next stitch along on the top of the blue square. I'm working into each stitch rather than into the spaces, and I'm going to make another slip stitch. And all we're doing is working side to side, doing a slip stitch each time. So into the next, I'm picking up both loops by the way, into the next pink one and a slip stitch, and into the next blue one and a slip stitch, and pink and blue. I recommend that you don't pull it too tight if you can. Just let it sit on the surface. But you do manage to pick up quite a good rhythm, which is always good with crochet. I'm deliberately going slowly so that you can see what I'm doing, but normally I could rattle through this quite quickly. And I'll do another couple and then I'll let you see more closely what it looks like. Pull that up. And there is your side to side slip stitch join. I don't know if this, I'll keep this in camera and keep it in focus, but that lets you see what it looks like. It's going from side to side with a little slip stitch each time. The interesting thing is, this by the way is quite flat. I'm not a great fan of the single crochet or the double crochet joins where it forms a ridge that can fall in one direction or the other. I feel that's untidy. This lies like a nice little braid and nice and flat, and so it creates a nice pattern of its own. On the back, all you have are little V stitches, which I think is very neat and flat. So that is my side to side slip stitch join. So I'm going to work along to the end of this square where I come to the corners, and I'll come back and show you how we start to attach the next two squares. I'm at the end of the first two squares, and you can see how neatly and very firmly joined they are. And I have put my next two squares in position. So all you need to do is, I've finished with the blue, so I'm just going to go across to the corner of this, what would you call this? Is the mushroom colour. and make my slip stitch, and then to the corner of the pale turquoise, the duck egg, and make my slip stitch, and then on I go. Next stitch, slip stitch, next stitch, slip stitch, and side to side all the way along. And there you can see it's just continued right along the join between the squares. So I'll go continue and join all of my squares, and then I'll show you the coming in the opposite direction to join the other sides. I've worked my first join all the way along. I've decided just to make 6 squares for this sample. So that's continued all the way along, and I'm now about to join the other sides of the squares. So I've started my cream yarn in the corner of the pink here, and I'm going to work along here. There's a couple of things that you need to be aware of when you're working the second join, and that is that your yarn is always on the front. If you find that it has gone to the back, then you can't really do the stitch. So make sure your yarn is always on the front. So what I've done here is I've done my first, I've attached my yarn and done my first slip stitch in the opposite square. And you can see the yarn is sitting in the front. So I've also done the first pink. So I'm ready to go to the mushroom coloured square to do the next slip stitch. My yarn is on the front. I've got it carefully held with my forefinger, and I'm also going to use this finger to help me pick up this stitch here, because it's when I'm working flat on the table, it can be just a little bit more tricky. So I just slip my forefinger underneath so that this is raised, and then it's very easy to pick up the stitch and pull it through. And then down to the pink one and pull it through, and then up to the mushroom one and pull it through. My left hand can become quite useful when I'm doing stitches like this, or your right hand if you're left-handed. So that is the start of this join. So I'm going to work along until I come to the intersection, and I'll be back to show you what happened. I'm just about at this junction now, and of course there's no space left for my finger to hold this up, so I'm just working flat on the table. I've just got 2 or 3 stitches left to make, so that's going in there, and then this one into here, and then I'm at the corner of the mushroom square, so I'm going to put that in. So we're actually sharing the corner with the previous join. I'm going to go in to the pink one and push that through and make my slip stitch into the pink corner. Oops, I'll do that again because that's a little bit on the tight side. So I just want to push that through here and pull the yarn through in a normal slip stitch, and then I'm going to go to the corner of the duck egg one and make my slip stitch, and we're off on the next part of the join, corner of the blue one, and then off we go. We've gone over the join, so I'm going to make a couple of more stitches and then let you see what the join looks like. Into here and so on. It's quite forgiving. If you miss a stitch, or if you think that your squares are maybe one stitch out, they're not aligning terribly well, you can fudge it. By fudging, I mean you can, wait a minute, just make my yarn. You can put 2 stitches in one just to make sure that your corners are equal. I'm not explaining myself terribly well there, but I think when you start working, you know that if you're doing something like granny squares or solid granny squares, you know that your stitch count will be accurate, so there shouldn't be any problem anyway. I'm just going to do a little bit more of this. There. Now, it's again a very tight, neat join between the two, as the two joins work over each other. And that is your side-to-side slip stitch join, also known as the zigzag join. I'm going to finish these off now. It will go back in the drawer as a sample, but at least it's now a sample with the join done as well. And I hope you have a go at it, because it really does look a good join. And I'll see you again for the next tutorial. Bye.